They taunted her limp as soon as she set foot on that polished marble floor. They mocked the jagged scar curving across her right cheek and the slight tremor in her hand. "Wrong place, lady," one man sneered, as if his voice alone could chase her away. Rows of leather chairs lined the observation area, and a handful of spectators already pressed forward to see what kind of show might unfold. Nobody expected anything impressive from a woman who wore scuffed tactical boots and carried a worn equipment bag instead of displaying sponsored gear. The overhead lights gleamed off brass casings, the air rich with gun oil and cordite. She paused near Station 4, eyes steady, posture tense, as if anticipating further ridicule. Someone whispered about a lucky fluke as she even hit the paper. Then from across the range, a scornful grin flashed. Brandon, a man praised for his championship-level marksmanship. No one knew yet that her first shot would silence the entire club. She shifted her weight onto her good leg, the other encased in a medical brace below the knee, metal supports pressing against damaged muscle. A uniformed range officer told her to keep it moving. Murmurs rose among the watchers. She probably wouldn't last 5 minutes. Her lips remained pressed thin, refusing to engage. Instead, she reached into her bag and withdrew an older SIG Sour, its slide bearing the marks of years of service. It certainly lacked the custom modifications a club regulars loved to display. Yet the moment she racked the slide, a hush fell over everyone in earshot. They sensed something different about the way she handled the weapon, as though she belonged to it and it belonged to her. Brandon, standing near the corner with folded arms, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The tension in that echoing space grew dense. Spectators leaned forward instinctively. Her name was Sarah Winters, a 36-year-old former SWAT officer who had served on Dallas PD's elite tactical unit. She never announced this to anyone. She never flashed badges or boasted about her record. She preferred silence over empty bravado. Behind those sharp eyes lingered a residue of pain, not just in the leg that never fully healed, but from the memories that refused to let go. A year prior, she had lost a close friend and partner in a hostage rescue gone wrong. On that day, she'd taken fire to her lower leg, leaving her with permanent nerve damage. People often glanced at her brace and assumed she was fragile. She wanted them to keep underestimating her. It was easier that way. Brandon was a reigning star, a charismatic, well-dressed marksman with corporate sponsorships splashed across his custom shooting vest. He carried himself like a celebrity, waving at members who recognized him from social media or local competitions. Whenever he stepped onto a range, phones came out to record. He thrived on attention. It fueled his ego as much as the magazines that fed his custom firearms. Standing 6 feet tall with that casual smirk, he epitomized confidence. Rumor had it he came from money, his father having built a successful security firm. Meanwhile, Sarah's father had been a mechanic, her mother a school teacher. She never sought the spotlight. She just knew how to survive. At exactly 3:15 in the afternoon, Brandon approached her station. He tapped his watch with theatrical flair. The crowd, always eager for drama, inched closer. "You're up against me if you want any chance," he said, letting out a dismissive laugh. "Though I wouldn't get my hopes up." He motioned toward her brace, then turned away with a smirk. Another wave of snickers rippled among the onlookers. She stared after him, thinking of how easy it would be to respond with bitterness. Instead, she inhaled slowly. She let the old training resurface in her mind, then adjusted her stance, ignoring every curious eye upon her. A board-certified range officer signaled them to begin the first warm-up round. Several other shooters took their places in neighboring lanes, each assigned a target at 15 yards, paper silhouettes dangling from motorized rails. Sarah's target inched forward, a fresh white sheet against the black backstop. The chatter continued behind her, but she shut it out. She visualized the center mass, extended her arms, aligned the sights. Her first shot rang out, echoing against concrete walls. The bullet struck dead center, not a millimeter off. A hush, deep and immediate, overtook the entire space. She fired again, same perfect hole. Even those who had been laughing at her brace moments before leaned forward in disbelief. Brandon, somewhere behind her line of vision, clenched his jaw. Without turning, She could sense his reaction. A mini crowd formed behind her lane. Phones raised to capture the improbable moment. Murmurs replaced the earlier jeers. Is she police? Special forces? She must have practiced for years. Others resisted praising her, claiming it was nothing but luck. Still, that crisp double-tap grouping caused a stir. The range officer stepped over, examined the paper, then glanced in her direction with a look of professional admiration. She calmly ejected the magazine and placed the pistol on the bench, stepping back with a slight hitch in her leg. The watchers parted, as if granting her a corridor space. Brandon's eyes flickered with annoyance. He was clearly unaccustomed to sharing the spotlight. He walked up, looked at the target, and gave a forced laugh. Not bad for a warm-up, he said, nodding as if to give a reluctant compliment. Then, leaning in so only she could hear, he added, but hitting center at 15 yards is child's play. Let's see how you handle something more demanding. He signaled one of the staff members, who promptly dialed the target out to 30 yards. People exchanged glances, waiting to see if this new distance would expose her inexperience. She did not protest. She loaded a fresh magazine, then squared her shoulders, ignoring the pain in her knee, and aimed with measured confidence. Flash! A single shot rang out. The target reeled back in when commanded. One hole again, precisely on the bullseye. Applause rippled through the bystanders this time, though some looked stunned that she had matched Brandon's standards so easily. His jaw tensed. He fiddled with the collar of his shooting vest. Next, his voice rose enough for everyone to hear. All right, that's enough pistol practice. Why don't we spice things up with a rifle challenge? The officer, caught in the crossfire of tension, nodded hesitantly. They were about to skip the normal rotation, which might upset other shooters, but the crowd seemed more than happy to witness a duel. She looked down at her brace for a moment, then met his gaze without blinking. Something about her calm demeanor rattled him. He marched across the range, grabbed his custom AR-15 from its case, and checked the action. The audience parted like a wave to let him pass. He swaggered back, giving a pointed glance at Sarah's worn equipment bag, wordlessly questioning if she had anything comparable to his top-of-the-line gear. Slowly, she unzipped her bag and pulled out a well-worn tactical rifle, a standard-issue piece from her SWAT days, with clear wear marks on the handguard. People gasped in unison, some murmuring that it was outdated. She caressed it with the familiarity of an old friend. That weapon had seen countless high-risk operations in urban environments far from this pristine range. Brandon set a new target at 75 yards. The official recommended a bench rest, but Sarah insisted on standing. She braced her injured leg carefully, ignoring the jolt that traveled to the nerve endings. Then she stabilized the rifle, flicked the safety, and inhaled. The memory of her training flooded back. She was no longer in a polished indoor range. She was on a rooftop position during a hostage standoff, heart pounding as the radio crackled with updates. In her mind, she heard the voice of her old partner, someone she'd lost. David used to say, "Don't rush the shot, own the shot." With that echo in her head, she exhaled halfway and squeezed the trigger. The muzzle rose slightly. The shot battered the silence. A staff member reeled the target in. The bullet hole appeared directly through the center ring. For a casual observer, it was flawless. Some watchers broke into applause, whistling at her skill. Brandon's expression tightened. He shouldered his own rifle, letting out a small hiss of breath. Shots hammered in rapid sequence. Thud, 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 each presumably on target. When the paper returned, he'd clustered them in a neat group near center, albeit slightly off. A few onlookers commented that Sarah's single shot was more precise. With a dismissive shrug, he tried to brush aside any sense of rivalry, but the tension crackled between them. She calmly stood, or tried to, pressing a hand on her knee so she wouldn't stumble. A trickle of sweat clung to her temple. The ache was flaring, but she wouldn't let it show. A flurry of voices erupted behind her. People wanted a formal competition now. Even the range manager approached, uncertain but intrigued. Brandon smirked. He seized a chance to formalize a challenge that would highlight his brand endorsements. "Fine," he said. "Let's do a real test." We'll each tackle a series of stations with different firearms. Let's see if Miss Limps-a-Lot can keep up. The crowd stiffened at his sharp tone. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze, then set her rifle down and spoke quietly but firmly. Name the time. In that moment, the onlookers realized there was more to her than raw talent. There was something unbreakable. The date was set for the next day. Enough time to gather an audience. Word spread fast, especially once a local firearms blogger tweeted about the female ex-cop with near-perfect aim. By evening, the club's social media was buzzing with speculation. Some believed it was a publicity stunt. Others doubted the limping woman could possibly beat a seasoned competitor like Brandon. A few recognized the signs of actual tactical training. They posted side-by-side pictures of a SWAT officer in tactical gear from 3 years ago, comparing the stance to what they'd seen in person. Gradually, curiosity swelled. She spent the night in a modest hotel on the outskirts of town. The neon sign outside blinked through the window, casting a restless glow across the bedspread. She rested her brace against a chair, trying to massage the stiffness in her calf. Then she pulled out an old photograph from her wallet. It showed her and David Martinez smiling through sweaty faces, tactical gear still on, after a successful operation. The photograph had survived the ambush that took his life. Sarah breathed a shaky breath. She recalled his final advice before the fatal call-out. You're more than your injuries. Don't let them define you. That memory left a pang in her heart, but also a glimmer of determination. Her phone buzzed with messages from new followers cheering her on. She allowed herself a small smile, though it wavered under the weight of her past. Morning arrived with bright Texas sunshine filtering into the range's large main hall. The staff had set up multiple stations. Pistol targets at shorter distances, a shotgun station for clay pigeons, and rifle lanes that stretched out to 200 yards. The final station boasted a long-range setup, rumored to be 300 yards or more. Everyone predicted that Brandon, with his sponsor-supplied equipment, would dominate. He roamed the staging area in a sleek jacket emblazoned with brand patches, optics companies, specialized ammunition, and a major firearms accessory brand. Cameras trailed him, capturing every confident grin. Sarah arrived wearing the same tactical boots, brace strapped firmly over faded jeans, hair tied back. She moved carefully, ignoring the pointed stares. A hush settled as she stepped into the competition zone. This was no official league event, but the crowd looked substantial. Club members, enthusiasts, and curious folks from the surrounding area. They recognized Brandon from social media and now wanted to see if that cop woman could possibly stand toe-to-toe with him. Brandon strutted forward, offering a mocking half-bow. Welcome, everyone, he said, voice projected so all could hear. We'll go station by station, from pistols to shotguns, then intermediate rifles, and finally the precision rifle challenge. Best aggregate score wins. And if we happen to tie, his grin took on a predatory edge, we'll settle it at the longest range possible. Sarah merely nodded. Then the range manager signaled the first round to begin. She and Brandon took their positions at a set of pistol lanes, each assigned a standard 9mm with identical sights. The target was placed at 15 yards. In the swirl of watchers, some jostled for a better view. Sarah steadied her stance, inhaled, exhaled. Shots popped in quick succession. Her grouping clustered near center. Brandon's were similarly tight, though a shade off to the right. The scoreboard on a digital display showed them tied in overall points for that station. A murmur of surprise rustled through the crowd. They proceeded to a second station, switching to a .45 ACP at a slightly longer distance. Brandon blazed through with typical speed, landing decent hits. She took an extra moment lining up each shot, her body swaying slightly from persistent ache in her leg. The result was nearly perfect accuracy, beating his total by 1 point. He rolled his shoulders with forced nonchalance, but shot her a withering glance. The crowd's excitement grew. A sudden shift happened at the shotgun station, where they had to shoot clay pigeons that launched overhead. Brandon's stance radiated ease. He cracked the shotgun open with practice flare, loaded shells, and pulverized each clay disc, hardly missing a beat. Sarah stumbled on her second clay, losing track of it for a millisecond, letting it sail wide before she fired. She still clipped it, but not with the total precision of Brandon. The scoreboard crept in his favor. Observers whispered that perhaps she'd found her limit. But the next set of challenges involved intermediate rifles. That was where her tactical training truly shined. They used a semi-automatic platform at 100 yards, then a more advanced carbine station, featuring time transitions from cover to cover. She handled each movement with methodical calm. On one stage, the official loaded her rifle with only 5 rounds, forcing her to reload quickly. She performed the reload with crisp efficiency that matched or surpassed Brandon's showy techniques. The audience murmured about how her style seemed less flashy, yet absolutely reliable. By the end of that round, the scoreboard hovered almost even again, each of them ahead in certain segments. Brandon's frustration pulsed beneath his cocky facade. As the staff prepared the next station, Sarah felt a surge of old memories. The cacophony of the crowd faded to a dull roar. She recalled being pinned down behind a concrete barrier in a warehouse standoff, dust choking the air. David was alive then, yelling at her to maintain her position. She'd had to kneel on her left leg for so long that it almost gave out. That day she'd made the shot that ended the threat. But David was lost to a hidden gunman a month later. She blinked, returning to the present. She caught her reflection in a tinted glass panel. Scar on her cheek, sweat dampening her brow. The mission now was different, but the inner vow remained. Keep going. You owe it to those who didn't make it home. Sarah and Brandon advanced to a station that required hitting steel plates at varied distances. The instructor explained that some plates were angled to deflect rounds unpredictably. Each competitor had a limited ammunition supply. They had to choose carefully. Brandon fired first, striking most plates with speed. Then he wasted 2 shots on a plate that pivoted unexpectedly, missing them both. She took a steadier approach, pacing her breath. Bang hit. She shifted an inch. Bang hit. The final plate swung left at the last second, but she had studied its pattern. She angled her rifle slightly, squeezed off her shot, and sent it ringing loudly. The crowd let out a roar. Brandon tightened his jaw. The scoreboard announced she was ahead by 2 points now. As the next station was being set up, her leg cramped. She placed a hand against a wooden barrier, forcing weight off the brace. Brandon seized on the moment to sow doubt. If you can't stand, you might want to forfeit, he called out. The audience parted in tense silence. She lifted her gaze, swallowing the pain, and replied, I've stood through worse. Then she steadied herself, ignoring the dull throb that radiated from the old injury. Some spectators caught the brittle edge in Brandon's voice. They wondered if he felt threatened by her resilience. Others admired Sarah's refusal to be rattled. A hush of anticipation draped over the range. The penultimate station involved an obstacle course. They had to move from a low crouch behind a barricade, then dash to a vantage point, and finally shoot a target at 150 yards. Under normal circumstances, Sarah might have run it with ease, but her leg locked halfway through. She stumbled, gasps erupted. Brandon slid forward and hammered his shots with smooth transitions. By the time she braced herself behind the vantage point, he was already finished. Still, she inhaled deeply, aimed to the scope, and fired 3 control rounds. All landed near the bullseye. The scoreboard flickered. Brandon's run was fractionally faster, so he picked up valuable time bonus points. They ended up nearly tied again. At last, the final station. The crowd pressed close. Phones out. Those staff tried to keep them behind the safety lines. A long bench was set up. 2 precision rifles waited. The official sign read, 300 yards, best of 5 shots, highest accuracy. Brandon approached with an air of triumph, certain that large-caliber precision rifles were his domain. He had sponsorship deals revolving around long-distance shooting. Sarah approached in silence. The range manager announced the rules. Each competitor had 5 shots, no more, to land as close to center as possible. The staff would measure grouping, then tally final scores. Brandon volunteered to shoot first. He lifted the heavy rifle, adjusting the bipod. The hush was intense. Even cameras seemed to blink slower. He fired 5 shots, spacing them out for maximum accuracy. The bullet impact scattered near center, not perfectly tight, but good enough to impress most watchers. Applause rippled as the staff reeled in the target, verifying he'd landed a consistent pattern. Then it was Sarah's turn. She exhaled carefully, lowering herself prone. The brace pressed uncomfortably against the ground. The official handed her 5 cartridges. She loaded them, feeling the weight of the rifle in her arms. She glanced at the scope, noticing a slight misalignment. Her heart skipped. Someone must have tampered with it, or it could be an unintentional mismatch. Regardless, she had only 5 shots. She didn't signal foul. There was no conclusive proof. Instead, she summoned that old tactical training. She recalled operations where equipment got damaged and you had to adapt on the fly. She inhaled, aligning her body behind the rifle, letting adrenaline merge with focus. Then she squeezed the trigger. The blast rang out, punctuating the tension. She fired the second shot without hurry, trusting her instincts. On the third, she paused longer, adjusting for a slight breeze that rustled through the overhead ventilation. The final 2 shots cracked in steady intervals. Then the official reeled in her target. A wave of stunned rippled across the crowd. Her bullet holes formed a group, so tight they nearly overlapped. Gasps erupted. Some even shouted expletives. Brandon paled, stepping forward to see the cluster. The staff measured it meticulously, verifying that she'd landed a near-perfect grouping. The scoreboard flashed. She outscored him by 3 points. Cheers soared. Phones whipped around to capture the champion's face as he realized he'd been beaten. He sputtered accusations about sabotage, insisting that someone must have rigged something for her advantage. But a suspicious hush overcame the staff. They pulled security footage that showed, if anything, his own assistant messing with the scopes earlier that morning. The crowd started murmuring indignantly. Brandon's meltdown followed. He tried to salvage his image, muttering excuses that she had unfair advantages from her police training. Yet people simply turned away, drawn to congratulate Sarah. The manager apologized to her for any tampering that might have occurred. She just nodded, expression unreadable. She had won on her own merits. She had proven that even a damaged leg couldn't stop her from fulfilling the promise she made to herself. Never let the loss of a partner be in vain. This was how she honored David, by standing tall when the world expected her to kneel. The swirl of applause crescendoed around her like an embrace. Some onlookers tried to interview her on the spot, thrusting phones forward. She managed a soft smile, thanked them politely, and set the rifle down. Then she moved off the line to catch her breath. Her brace ached, but her heart felt lighter than it had in months. A local reporter asked how she felt about her victory. She exhaled and replied, "I didn't shoot to beat him. I shot to keep a promise." Brandon, cornered by evidence of tampering, faced an avalanche of criticism. Sponsors began distancing themselves. The crowd's adoration crumbled into contempt. He slunk away, leaving her to be hailed as the real champion. She, however, refused to gloat. Leaning against a wall, she recalled that day during the standoff again. The day David saved her life, only to lose his own weeks later. She remembered whispering over his badge, "I'll keep going for both of us." This victory was one more step toward that vow. A club official invited her for a celebratory handshake in front of the cameras. She obliged, though her smile was subdued. Then he made an announcement. "We want to donate part of today's proceeds to a first responders fund in honor of Officer Winter's service." That triggered applause from every corner. A few tears glistened in watchers' eyes. The synergy of pride and respect rolled to the crowd, drowning out the negativity that had fueled the confrontation. In the aftermath, reporters tried to chase her down for exclusive interviews. She answered a handful of questions, though her brevity hinted she wasn't there for fame. Some recognized the invisible scars beneath her measured tone. Word spread that she'd once been part of an elite tactical unit. Some alleged she was a sniper instructor. She neither confirmed nor denied. The last question from a persistent journalist was, "So, is this the start of a new career for you?" She paused, scanning the chaotic swirl of onlookers, cameras, and well-wishers. With a measured sigh, she replied, "I've had enough battles, but maybe I can help others who are still fighting theirs." By the following evening, The news cycle lit up with headlines about the female cop who humbled a shooting champion. Social media swarmed with the highlight clip of her final shot. But Sarah didn't linger to bask in that attention. She quietly visited a small local cafe, her brace squeaking on the tile floor. A group of officers and veterans recognized her from the story. They waved her over, offering a seat at their table. She joined them, sipping black coffee and listening to their conversation about recovery, duty, and the slow grind of life after service or injury. One older officer placed a weathered hand on hers and said, "You showed them what true grit looks like. Thank you." She smiled back, watery-eyed, acknowledging that these were the real moments that mattered. Soon, she found an unexpected calling, teaching tactical shooting to injured officers and veterans struggling with PTSD or physical limitations like hers. The club that had witnessed her triumph offered to sponsor free sessions for wounded first responders. She agreed to volunteer, turning her skill into a method of healing for others. Word spread that she provided quiet guidance, focusing on breath control and steady discipline. People said she rarely raised her voice, yet somehow her presence steadied every anxious heartbeat on the firing line. Months passed. Brandon's scandal overshadowed his prior victories. He issued a public apology, tried to rehabilitate his image, but the trust was gone. Meanwhile, Sarah's influence grew in quiet corners of the first responder community. She organized small gatherings at the range after hours, bringing coffee and letting participants talk about their nightmares or frustrations. Then, under the dim overhead lights, they practiced controlled firing, one shot at a time, allowing the discipline to soothe their restless minds. One crisp morning, a young officer fresh from medical leave arrived with trembling hands. He flinched at the first crack of gunfire. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, guided him through the basics, and reminded him to breathe slowly. Shot by shot, he gained confidence. At the end of the session, he thanked her with tears in his eyes, saying, "I thought I'd never hold a service weapon again." She nodded, remembering how she had once felt the same. That was the day she realized healing could come in many forms. On a rainy weekend, local news stations showed up, curious about the ongoing transformation at the club. They filmed her working with multiple disabled officers and veterans, capturing how she knelt beside them, sometimes wincing from her own injury, and gave them technique pointers. When asked why she devoted so much time to this cause, she answered calmly, "I survived. Some didn't. This is my way of honoring them." The coverage aired, prompting more donations to the first responders fund that had begun in her name. The negativity of that humiliating day with Brandon had faded, replaced by an enduring story of redemption and resilience. Eventually, a reporter from a national magazine approached her with the idea of writing a feature. They wanted to tell her background, her injuries, and her improbable victory. She refused to exploit personal grief, but agreed to share a small piece of her story. "We lost good people in the line of duty. Some of us came back with scars you can see, others with scars you can't. Shooting was never about glory for me. It was about precision under pressure, and now it's about reclaiming confidence." The article titled her "The Unexpected Champion," praising her marksmanship while lauding her work with fellow officers and veterans. The piece quickly went viral online, leading to an influx of emails from wounded service members wanting to learn from her. She responded politely, directing them to the program she was helping run. She refused to call herself a mentor, saying she was just another survivor who picked up the pieces. In a symbolic gesture one afternoon, she placed her battered brace on a workbench, unscrewing a small metal plate that bore her old badge number. She replaced it with a new tag, "Stand when they expect you to kneel." The phrase served as a daily reminder, not just for her, but for everyone who saw her walking the range. She embraced that motto wholeheartedly, turning it into quiet encouragement for anyone who thought they had reached their limit. What would you have done in Sarah's position? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Has someone ever underestimated you because of your appearance or disability? We'd love to hear your stories of respect earned the hard way. If this former officer's courage inspired you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of everyday heroes standing their ground. Because respect isn't given, it's earned, sometimes in the most unexpected ways.